Hi, it's Kathy Andronikou, and I'm today going to be doing a little Halloween card for you using Critter Costumes and Sweet Witch from Penny Black. So let's get started. To start with, I'm going to be using the sentiment from the Sweet Witch set, which is Trick or Treat. Now, I've cut a piece of Strathmore mixed media paper to 3 3/4 inches square, and I've placed that in my MISTI ready to stamp, and I've taken my sentiment. Now, before I actually stamp it, I don't want the whole word to feature, so I'm going to stamp first onto a post-it note. So I'm using my VersaFine Onyx Black ink here, and I'm just going to ink up my sentiment. And I'm not going to be too fussed if it's not a clear impression, because it's literally just for the post-it note. So I just want the word treat. So I'm going to get some scissors and I'm going to trim my post-it note down whilst it's in my MISTI to just leave the word treat blank. So I'm just going to trim now the trick bit off here whilst it's still in my MISTI. And it's important that you leave the post-it note attached, because obviously the positioning needs to remain the same. Okay, so now I'm going to ink up my stamp again. And then I'm going to stamp down onto my card. So you can see now I've got my trick there. And because I quite like a really nice dark black colour, I'm just going to ink it a second time, because I really like that really dark impression that you get from double inking. So that's now all ready to add my little critters. So I'm just going to position where I want my little critters now. So I'm going to use this cute little hedgie here, and then I'm going to have this little guy slightly lower down so that they're actually framing the word trick, I think. So now they're positioned in my MISTI. I'll just move these magnets around a little bit. They get attracted to each other. And then I'm going to ink again and stamp both those little critters. Again, I'm using my VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I'm just going to give that a couple of hits again. Okay, so they're now ready to colour. So now we're ready to colour in our little critters, but I'm not going to do something with solid colouring. I'm going to do like a pointillism effect. So I'm going to be using the Chameleon Fineliner Pens, and I'm going to be using YO2 and OR3. Now, because there's ink in the cap, I can actually blend from one colour to another. So I'm going to take the OR3 and I'm going to put the cap of that onto my yellow pen and just leave it there for a few seconds. So literally just a couple of seconds on there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do little tiny dots on my pumpkin here. And I'm going to go in a little circular motion as I go up the rib of my pumpkin. And gradually, as I go up with these little tiny dots, it sort of colours it in and gives that pointillism effect. But it's not a solid colour, but it will gradually transition back to that lighter yellow from that darker orangey colour. So you can see here it's gone back now to that lighter tone. So I'm going to repeat that now until I've completed the pumpkin. Okay, so now we have our first pumpkin coloured. We're ready to go on to our next one. So this time I'm going to be using the OR4 and the YO2 fine liners. So I'm sticking with the YO2 pen and I'm going to be using the OR4 top that has the orange ink in it. So again, I'm going to pop the lid on just for a few seconds and then I'm going to start to colour my little pumpkin guy here. Okay, so now we're back to our original colours and both our pumpkins have been coloured in. So we can now concentrate on the rest of the image. Let's go for an NU3. I think that may be a little bit, oh, maybe that's a bit too dark. Well, we'll have this little critter a bit darker. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to colour him in his little face here, but I'm not going to be too fussed about how well I colour him because I'm going to be using my water brush to pull some of the colour around his face. So you can see I'm not being at all careful with how I do this. I'm just scribbling and then I'm just going to use this water brush just to soften that out. Because the inks in the fine liners are actually water based, you can actually use them a bit like you would a watercolour to get the effect that you want. I'm just going to lighten those arms a bit because they're a bit dark where I put the couple of layers of colour on there. Looks like he's been playing in the mud. Okay. So, and then I'm going to repeat that for this little fella here. I'm taking BR2 and BR3. So I'm going to take my BR3 pen and put it on my BR2, sorry, my BR2 pen and put my BR3 cap on, literally just for 1 second. And then I'm just going to colour. So you can see it's a little bit lighter in places where I've used that lighter tone. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-infuse the pen again. So I'm still going to use my BR2 with my BR3 cap. And I'm just going to put in these little prickles. So I'm just doing very faint little lines here to add his prickles. And I'm going to also add in some darker prickles as well. So for my final bit, I'm just going to do his little ruffle here, but I'm just going to do that in one colour, and I'm just going to do that darker OR3 just to add a little bit of contrast. And again, I'm just going to use the pointillism type effect where I'm just colouring by dotting, but this time I'm actually going to soften that with my water brush. So that he's still got that textured effect, but it's also filled in some of the colour. So that's now completed the colouring of the front of my card. I'm going to ground these guys because I don't think they're particularly grounded at the moment. So I'm just going to add a few little lines here. So I think that's now ready to mount onto a card, and then we can stamp the treat inside. So I'm going to be using a 5-inch card blank, and onto that I'm going to mount some patterned paper from the Golden Moment designer paper pad, and I've actually cut that to measure 4.5 inches, so that's going to be glued in place there. Then I've also got some of the mix and match penny black papers, and I've trimmed this down to 3 7/8 of an inch to go on top of there, and then obviously my sentiments. So I'm now going to stick all of that down together. So now that I've done that bit there, I still feel it's like missing something, so I'm just going to take my BR5 pen, and I'm just going to do a little bit of a border with a few lines of dashes and some dots, I think, just to sort of bring it together a bit more, really. Okay, so now we're ready to do the inside of the card. So we're going to be stamping the second part of our sentiment, which is going to say "or treat." Because I just want it to say "or treat," I want the "or treat" really to be centered here. So I think that's probably about right. And then I'm going to use my post-it note again, as I did before. So this time I'm going to do it this way up, so roughly there, and then stamp my sentiment onto my post-it note very quickly. And I want the "or treat" this time to be stamped, so I'm going to cut that bit out. And then stamp that a couple of times. So that now completes my card. So I have trick or treat. And now my card is complete. So we now have this little critter costume set, all coloured in using the Chameleon Fineliners, with trick or treat from the Sweet Wish set and the patterned paper from the Golden Moment set. Thanks for watching.